Chapter 19 of The People of the Abyss. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Peter Yearsley. The People of the Abyss by Jack London. Chapter 19. The Ghetto. Is it well that while we range with science glorying in the time, city children soak and blacken soul and sense in city slime? There among the gloomy alleys progress halts on palsied feet. Crime and hunger cast out maidens by the thousand on the street. There the master scrimps his haggard seamstress of her daily bread. There the single sordid attic holds the living and the dead. There the smouldering fire of fever creeps across the rotted floor, and the crowded couch of incest in the warrens of the poor. At one time the nations of Europe confined the undesirable Jews in city ghettos. But today the dominant economic class, by less arbitrary but none the less rigorous methods, has confined the undesirable yet necessary workers into ghettos of remarkable meanness and vastness. East London is such a ghetto, where the rich and the powerful do not dwell, and the traveller cometh not, and where 2,000,000 workers swarm, procreate, and die. It must not be supposed that all the workers of London are crowded into the East End, but the tide is setting strongly in that direction. The poor quarters of the city proper are constantly being destroyed, and the main stream of the unhoused is toward the east. In the last 12 years, one district, London over the border, as it is called, which lies well beyond Aldgate, Whitechapel, and Mile End, has increased 260,000, or over 60%. The churches in this district, by the way, can seat but 1 in every 37 of the added population. The City of Dreadful Monotony, the East End is often called, especially by well-fed, optimistic sightseers, who look over the surface of things and are merely shocked by the intolerable sameness and meanness of it all. If the East End is worthy of no worse title than the City of Dreadful Monotony, and if working people are unworthy of variety and beauty and surprise, it would not be such a bad place in which to live. But the East End does merit a worse title. It should be called the City of Degradation. While it is not a city of slums, as some people imagine, it may well be said to be one gigantic slum. From the standpoint of simple decency and clean manhood and womanhood, any mean street, of all its mean streets, is a slum. Where sights and sounds abound which neither you nor I would care to have our children see and hear, is a place where no man's children should live and see and hear. Where you and I would not care to have our wives pass their lives, is a place where no other man's wife should have to pass her life. For here in the East End the obscenities and brute vulgarities of life are rampant. There is no privacy. The bad corrupts the good, and all fester together. Innocent childhood is sweet and beautiful, but in East London innocence is a fleeting thing, and you must catch them before they crawl out of the cradle, or you will find the very babes as unholily wise as you. The application of the Golden Rule determines that East London is an unfit place in which to live. Where you would not have your own babe live and develop and gather to itself knowledge of life and the things of life, is not a fit place for the babes of other men to live and develop and gather to themselves knowledge of life and the things of life. It is a simple thing, this Golden Rule, and all that is required. Political economy and the survival of the fittest can go hang if they say otherwise. What is not good enough for you is not good enough for other men, and there's no more to be said. There are 300,000 people in London, divided into families, that live in one-room tenements. Far, far more live in 2 and 3 rooms, and are as badly crowded, regardless of sex, as those that live in 1 room. The law demands 400 cubic feet of space for each person. In army barracks each soldier is allowed 600 cubic feet. Professor Huxley, at one time himself a medical officer in East London, always held that each person should have 800 cubic feet of space, and that it should be well ventilated with pure air. Yet in London there are 900,000 people living in less than the 400 cubic feet prescribed by the law. Mr. Charles Booth, who engaged in a systematic work of years in charting and classifying the toiling city population, estimates that there are 1,800,000 people in London who are poor and very poor. It is of interest to mark what he terms poor. By poor he means families which have a total weekly income of from 18 to 21 shillings. The very poor fall greatly below this standard. The workers as a class are being more and more segregated by their economic masters, and this process with its jamming and overcrowding tends not so much towards immorality as unmorality. Here is an extract from a recent meeting of the London County Council, terse and bald, but with a wealth of horror to be read between the lines. Mr. Bruce asked the chairman of the Public Health Committee whether his attention had been called to a number of cases of serious overcrowding in the East End. In St. George's in the East, a man and his wife and their family of 8 occupied one small room. This family consisted of 5 daughters aged 20, 17, 8, 4, and an infant, and 3 sons aged 15, 13, and 12. In Whitechapel, a man and his wife and their 3 daughters aged 16, 8, and 4, and 2 sons aged 10 and 12 years occupied a smaller room. In Bethnal Green, a man and his wife with 4 sons aged 23, 21, 19, and 16, and 2 daughters aged 14 and 7 were also found in one room. He asked whether it was not the duty of the various local authorities to prevent such serious overcrowding. But with 900,000 people actually living under illegal conditions, the authorities have their hands full. When the overcrowded folk are ejected, they stray off into some other hole, and as they move their belongings by night on hand-barrows, one hand-barrow accommodating the entire household goods and the sleeping children, it is next to impossible to keep track of them. If the Public Health Act of 1891 were suddenly and completely enforced, 900,000 people would receive notice to clear out of their houses and go on to the streets, and 500,000 rooms would have to be built before they were all legally housed again. The mean streets merely look mean from the outside, but inside the walls are to be found squalor, misery, and tragedy. While the following tragedy may be revolting to read, it must not be forgotten that the existence of it is far more revolting. In Devonshire Place, Lisson Grove, a short while back died an old woman of 75 years of age. At the inquest, the coroner's officer stated that all he found in the room was a lot of old rags covered with vermin. He had got himself smothered with the vermin. The room was in a shocking condition, and he had never seen anything like it. Everything was absolutely covered with vermin. The doctor said he found deceased lying across the fender on her back. She had one garment and her stockings on. The body was quite alive with vermin, and all the clothes in the room were absolutely grey with insects. Deceased was very badly nourished and was very emaciated. She had extensive sores on her legs, and her stockings were adherent to those sores. The sores were the result of vermin. A man present at the inquest wrote, "I had the evil fortune to see the body of the unfortunate woman as it lay in the mortuary, and even now the memory of that gruesome sight makes me shudder. There she lay in the mortuary shell, so starved and emaciated that she was a mere bundle of skin and bones. Her hair, which was matted with filth, was simply a nest of vermin. Over her bony chest leaped and rolled hundreds, thousands, myriads of vermin. If it is not good for your mother and my mother so to die, then it is not good for this woman, whosoever's mother she might be, so to die." Bishop Wilkinson, who has lived in Zululand, recently said, "No human of an African village would allow such a promiscuous mixing of young men and women, boys and girls." He had reference to the children of the overcrowded folk, who at 5 have nothing to learn, and much to unlearn, which they will never unlearn. It is notorious that here in the Ghetto the houses of the poor are greater profit earners than the mansions of the rich. Not only does the poor worker have to live like a beast, but he pays proportionately more for it than does the rich man